Welcome back, everyone, to another Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey into one of history's most stunning contrasts. We're going to look at how the microscopic spark of a single, almost accidental assassination directly ignited the macroscopic devastation of the Eastern Front during World War I. It's an incredible story of how highly specific human moments can literally set a whole continent on fire. Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. We've got a clear roadmap for our journey today. We'll start with the spark in Sarajevo, look at how the powder keg was built, untangle the complex alliances, and then pivot to the war on the Eastern Front. Finally, we'll wrap up by examining the staggering human toll and the ultimate fall of empires. Section 1. The spark in Sarajevo. A wrong turn changes history. You know, this timeline actually reads like a ticking clock thriller. Picture this. It's the morning of June 28, 1914. Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie arrive in Sarajevo, the capital of newly annexed Bosnia, for a state visit to inspect imperial troops. Later that same day, they narrowly escape death when Serbian terrorists throw a bomb at their open-topped car. They survived. But later that afternoon, their luck just completely ran out. In this bitter, bitter twist of historical irony, their driver makes a simple navigational error, a wrong turn. He inadvertently drives down the wrong street directly past 19-year-old Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip. Princip sees his chance, seizes the moment, and shoots the couple at point-blank range. And that single moment triggered an immediate, devastating domino effect. It's like watching a train crash in slow motion. Step 1. Austria-Hungary is absolutely furious. Backed by Germany, they declare war on Serbia exactly 1 month later, on July 28th. Step 2. Since Russia is Serbia's ally, within days, Germany declares war on Russia. Step 3. Germany invades France via Belgium, which then prompts Britain to declare war on Germany. Just like that, the sparks caught fire across the entire continent. So why did this one spark cause such a massive explosion? Well, let's look at Section 2, building the powder keg, fueling the fire. The first key factor here is imperialism. By the early 20th century, the Industrial Revolution was going full throttle. All these new technologies created a desperate need for empires to dominate new territories just to extract natural resources. Think oil, rubber, coal, and iron. Britain already held a massive empire stretching across 5 continents, and France controlled a huge chunk of Africa. Germany? Well, looking at all this, they wanted a larger slice of the territorial pie. So tensions naturally started boiling over as these countries constantly vied for global position. Next up, we have nationalism. Throughout the 19th century, this powerful, rising sense of national pride just swept through Europe, and it was a dual force. On the one hand, it drove oppressed groups to try and rid themselves of imperial rule. That's exactly what motivated Gavrilo Princip and his Serbian nationalist group to fight against Austro-Hungarian rule in Bosnia. But on the other hand, nationalism also fueled the big superpowers. For instance, after France lost land and money to Germany in the Franco-Prussian War back in 1870, French nationalism fueled a really deep, lingering desire for revenge. And finally, militarism. Now, what's really interesting about this is that militarism wasn't just about having a standing army. It was this methodical, fiercely competitive increase in military might. European powers had massive draft systems and were constantly obsessing over and fine-tuning their defense strategies. A prime example is the naval arms race. When Britain's Royal Navy rolled out the Dreadnought battleship, which could basically outgun anything else on the water, Germany simply refused to be outdone. They literally doubled their naval battle fleet just to compete. 79%. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount that Germany, which was by far the most militaristic country in Europe at the time, had increased its defense budget by July 1914. They weren't just prepared for war, they were actively expecting it. With empires armed to the teeth, we reach Section 3, the entangled alliances, dividing the board. Basically, the whole geopolitical chessboard was split right down the middle. On one side, we have the Triple Alliance. This was formed back in 1882 by Germany and Austria-Hungary, with Italy jumping in a bit later. Then, on the opposing side, you have the Triple Entente, which was formed in 1907 by Great Britain, Russia, and France, quite literally to protect themselves against Germany's growing threat. So, because of these rigid, entangled defensive pacts, a regional conflict in the Balkans was virtually destined to drag in all of Europe's heavy hitters. Emboldened by their powerful allies, everybody leaped into the fray. Now that the board is set, let's pivot entirely to the focus of our explainer today. Section 4, War on the Eastern Front, the uncontrolled blaze. The nations specifically fighting in this massive Eastern theater were clearly divided into two camps. You've got the Central Powers, consisting of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, and fighting against them were the Allied Powers, driven primarily by the might of the Russian Empire alongside Romania and Serbia. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer mind-boggling scale of the conflict. 2,166,700. That is the exact number of infantry soldiers in the Russian Empire's army alone by October 1917. And that's not even counting the tens of thousands of cavalry and thousands of heavy guns. These front lines stretched across immense, freezing landscapes for hundreds of miles. Because of this massive scale, the casualties were completely unprecedented. Section 5. A staggering human toll. Millions lost. When we break down the data for the Central Powers on the Eastern Front, the numbers are truly grim. We're looking at over 1.1 million dead. But look at the ratio of wounded and captured. Over 3.3 million wounded and more than 1.6 million captured soldiers. I mean, just imagine the absolute logistical nightmare of caring for those wounded and housing that many prisoners of war. It placed a completely unmanageable strain on the Central Powers. On the other side of the trenches, the Russian Empire suffered staggering, heartbreaking losses of life, over 2.5 million military deaths. But notice the civilian toll here. Over 1.1 million Russian civilians died. Some were killed directly for military action, sure, but hundreds of thousands died from war-related causes like starvation and disease, simply because the everyday infrastructure of the empire was crumbling under the immense weight of the war. And that crumbling infrastructure brings us right to Section 6, the fall of empires, revolution and peace. So, the crucial point is this. The unbearable pressure of the Eastern Front led directly to the collapse of the Russian Empire itself. By 1917, facing impossible internal and external strain, the Russian revolutions just swept the nation, first in February and then the October Revolution, which paved the way for Soviet Russia. Naturally, this new leadership desperately sought an exit from the slaughter. This ultimately resulted in the signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918, followed by the Treaty of Bucharest in May. The signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and the Treaty of Bucharest officially ended the horrific hostilities on the Eastern Front. The Russian Empire was no more, and massive territorial shifts were set into motion, drastically altering the map of Central and Eastern Europe forever. Bringing our narrative full circle back to the beginning, the causes of the Great War are incredibly complex. It's this giant web of imperialism, nationalism, and militarism binding empires together. But remarkably, it all traces back to that one brutal assassination in Sarajevo. A microscopic, almost accidental human moment that propelled an entire continent into macroscopic devastation. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought today. Millions died, ancient empires collapsed, and peace treaties were eventually signed. But as we look at the new borders drawn by the treaties of Brest-Litovsk and Bucharest, did they actually resolve the deep-seated conflicts of Europe? Or did they just plant the seeds for the very next world war? That is something to think about until our next explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.